Hey everybody, Biohack here. One of the most important subjects when it comes to gearing champions in Raid Shadow Legends is sets and set bonuses. And there's two different kinds of sets in the game. There are sets that give you stats, and there are sets that have some sort of set effect that is independent of the stats. Today, I wanted to make a video that talks specifically about that first type of gear set, the stat-giving set, and go over sort of which sets are actually the best and which ones give you the most amount of stats for the set value. I've seen a lot of information out there and different content creators talking about which sets are good and which sets are bad, and I think a lot of it is sort of overly simplistic and doesn't really tell the whole story and is sometimes just kind of wrong. So in this video, I'm going to show you a spreadsheet I made where we actually look at a breakdown of how many stats you're actually getting for every single set and talk about sort of how that informs what kind of champions you build. So particularly, we're looking at things like the life, offense, defense, speed, crit rate, crit damage, accuracy, resistance. What else do we have in here? Are cruel, immortal, divine offense, divine crit, all that kind of stuff. All the sets that give you stats. And so to actually go ahead and look at how good those stats are, I went ahead and made this spreadsheet here. Okay, so let me walk you through it because it's a little bit complicated. What we have here is a breakdown of all of the different sets and sort of how they stack up in terms of how many stats they give. And what I think is the best way to look at this is, if you think about the game, excluding masteries, there's really two ways you can get stats on a champion. You can either get them from the set bonus, or you can get them by rolling those sets on your gear, right? By upgrading the gear and getting multiple rolls. So what I think the important metric to look at when it comes to these stat sets is how many rolls on your gear would you have to get to equal that bonus from the set, what I'm going to call the set to roll ratio. Now, most of the stat sets in the game are two-piece sets. So there's a few like Swift Parry, for example, that are four-piece. So in those cases, I just divided it by two. But what we've essentially done here is we've input the amount of bonuses you get from the set. So in this case, we have a crit damage set. And then I've multiplied it. I've given you the option to do Lore of Steel Mastery. In this case, I have Lore of Steel on. You could set this to 0 and turn Lore of Steel off. I don't think the absolute number is as important as the relative value of one set to the other, so it doesn't really matter which one you do, and it won't really change much. So we have the set times the Lore of Steel bonus divided by what is the maximum roll you could get on any individual piece of gear. So I have that laid out here. In this case, I'm using, you don't have to use maximum. I'm using the maximum because I think it makes the most sense, but you could use the minimum, you could use the average, you could use the 5-star average, you could use the 5-star maximum. It doesn't really matter. Like I said, I don't think the absolute values are what's important. What's important is sort of how they stack up compared to each other. So what we have here is we have set bonus times the Lore of Steel bonus divided by the maximum amount of stats you could get on a roll. And what that means is sort of how many times you have to roll this piece of gear to get what is that same set bonus. And then once we have this value, we can sit here and we can compare different sets and see which one gives us the most amount of stats, or which ones would require the most amount of rolls to equal that set bonus. So there's a few interesting things we find here. First one is crit damage. This one is a 20% bonus, and percent stats can roll up to 7. So this gives you a 3.29% set to roll ratio. Sort of the median is things like HP, defense, attack, which give you a 15% bonus, which translates into about a 2.46 set to roll ratio. That's sort of what I would use as the baseline in most cases. Things like crit rate only give you a 12% bonus. So crit rate is kind of crappy, actually. Basically, you would never really want to use crit rate. And so like the value of looking at this number is it tells you things like, what does it make more sense to get a crit damage set with crit rate rolls, Or should I get a crit rate set with crit damage rolls if I want to get as much crit rate and crit damage as possible? Well, what this very clearly shows you is that you're much, much better off going for crit damage with crit rate rolls than you are the other way around. And that's because this set to roll ratio is much higher for crit damage to crit rate. A few other things we see here is that accuracy and resistance sets have some of the highest crit to roll ratio of any gear that is farmable in the game, with a 3.1 or 3.83 set to roll ratio. That's really, really good. That's better than basically anything else that you can farm. So don't sleep on your accuracy or your resistance gear. If you're at all interested in getting resistance on a champion, resistance sets are the best way to do that for sure. Deflection, resilience, and fatal all have the same kind of 20% bonus that crit damage does. So I probably could have linked them all in together, but they have a 3.29 ratio. It gets a little different when we start looking at speed, though. And the reason for that is speed sets are the only time where, or speed sets or other sets that give speed percentage, are the only time where we compare a percentage stat to a flat stat. And if you didn't know, percentage stats only affect the base level of your champion. And what this means is that the set to roll ratio is going to change based on the base speed of your champion. So I've gone ahead and just given you like 3 reasonable values here that you can use to get an idea of the set to roll ratio. For a base speed 90 champion, we only get a 2.07 set to roll ratio for speed gear. This is quite frankly garbage. I mean, compared to, this is almost as bad as crit rate, just barely over 2 for a speed 90 champion. It gets better if we have a speed 110 champion with a 2.53 ratio, but it's really not that much better than like regular HP defense attack gear. And I think this is important because everyone always talks about speed. Speed is the best gear. Speed is the best gear. I mean, you go see like gear tier lists and everyone's telling you that speed is really good gear. And they're not wrong necessarily, because speed is arguably the most important stat in the game. But from a set standpoint, if you don't only care about speed, like if you're not just trying to build a speed lead in arena or a go first champion in arena, the speed set's not really that great. I mean, if you have, say, a champion that is your defense down champion, you would be way better off rolling accuracy gear with speed rolls than you would rolling speed gear with accuracy rolls, just looking at this set to roll ratio. And honestly, like if your champion is not super fast base speed, if you have like an average 2.3 base speed, or sorry, an average like 100 base speed with a 2.3 set to roll ratio, like you'd be better off using, defense gear with a speed roll than you would be using speed on your champions. Yes, speed is a really important stat, and because of that, the speed set is very versatile and it's a very good set. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say that speed is bad, but I hope that by looking at these values, you get an idea that like speed sets are not the be-all and end-all of Raid. Like you should be trying to get accuracy gear just as much as you're trying to get speed gear if you're farming Dragon. I mean, accuracy gear for most champions in the game, any champion that wants to put on debuffs, you're probably better off getting accuracy gear than speed gear. Like speed gear is super overrated. Again, it's really important for go first in arena, at least until endgame, where people don't even run high speed anymore, apparently. So yeah, I mean, just keep that in mind. Like accuracy resistance is where it's at. And even if you're not running accuracy resistance, if you want a damage dealer, go for crit damage. That's way better. Like things like deflection and resilience are a little harder to get because you need to make them in the forge. So, I wouldn't compare them directly, but like certainly for damage dealers, crit damage is going to be your better option. Of course, you probably want to go with Savage anyway, but crit damage is a good option for that. And like I said, anything that needs accuracy or resistance, go with those sets instead of speed, if that's what you want to do. Okay, so that's all the base stats you can basically, or base gear sets you can basically farm in the game. There's just a few more things I want to point out. One is Swift Parry gear is nuts. Swift Parry gear is a 4-piece set of gear that gives you a 30% increase crit damage bonus plus I think it's a 18% increase speed bonus on a 4 set. So you have to divide it by 2 to get the same comparison to the 2 stats, but still really good. I mean, it's like the second highest set to roll ratio set in the game. So what this means is, well, for one, Swift Parry is insane for Arena anyway, but you should definitely be trying to get all of the core hammers you can from whatever events or tournaments or things that are going on, because core hammers are what limit you in farming or making Swift Parry gear in the Forge. So every time you see a core hammer in some sort of event or tournament, pay attention to that and try and get that gear, because that gear is going to be really good for lots of champions. Both for PvE, if you can get good gear, and especially for endgame arena or really any arena, Swift Parry gear is like super primo. Good stats and that insane bonus that keeps you alive 50% of the time when you take fatal damage. Okay, and then the last set is actually the best set in the game, which is absolutely nuts, and that is this Perception gear. Perception gear has crazy set to roll ratios. If you don't know, Perception gear gives you 40 accuracy, so you're getting basically all of the bonus of the accuracy set, and then on top of that, it gives you a 5% speed bonus. So it's a little bit of mix. It's basically the best set in the game in terms of accuracy and resistance for stats, plus speed stacked on top of it. Super, super good. You get Perception gear by farming the resources for it in Faction Wars and then making it in the Forge. So I would strongly recommend, even if you're new, especially if you're new, honestly, because the set to roll ratio makes a bigger difference when you're new. And you can't be rolling, like max rolls on your 6-star gear. The set to roll ratios are super important. Sets are much more important for new players than they are for endgame, in my opinion. Although they're very important for both. But yeah, definitely farm that Perception gear. Like I was saying, you farm it in Faction Wars. You get the resources in Faction Wars, and then you craft it in the Forge. If we go to the Forge here, it's right here. It uses these, I can't remember what these things are called, bloodstones that you farm. And then I would strongly recommend you use your rank, your rarity charms, your speed charms. Save some speed charms to make sure you use them on your Swift Parry, but use your extra speed charms on your Perception would be my recommendation generally. Accuracy charms, any champion that wants Swift Parry is going to want accuracy, so do that. And then, set charms, I would recommend using the top row because they're more likely to be good pieces, but whatever you do. Definitely go for your Swift Parry gear. I mean, if you look at my account, I have, in terms of like how much gear I have, I didn't mean Swift Parry, I meant Perception. I'm like stacked on Perception. I have so many champions in Perception gear because it's just insane for that set to roll ratio. So, I hope you guys found this helpful. If you did, please give a thumbs up on the video and subscribe and let me know in the comments. I stream Raid almost every day on my Twitch at twitch.tv/biohacktv. I usually stream under the Black Desert channel because I do hybrid streams of both BDO and Raid at the same time, and BDO is kind of my main game, but I'm happy to come talk to you about Raid over there and answer questions and all that kind of stuff. So please click that link if you're a Twitch viewer and come hang out with me, and I will see you all in the next video. Cheers.